Hey guys, it's Sarah from ExtremeTerrain.com, and today we have a review and install of the Raxiom factory GPS rear backup camera kit fitting your 07 through 18 Jeep Wrangler JKs. This kit adds a backup camera to your existing factory navigation system and can also be viewed at any time using the included switch. This kit includes a camera, the mount, as well as a wiring harness and does not require any updates or flashing to your Jeep. Coming in at around $400, there are some lower priced options on the market. However, they do not come as a complete kit like this one does. So if you're looking for a complete plug and play option, this is going to be the choice for you. I'm giving this install a 2 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter. It can be done in approximately 1 hour, although it may take a little bit longer depending on how you route your wiring harness through your Jeep. It does feature plug and play installation, but it will require some minor wiring for install. All right, with that said, let's jump right into our install. For this install, we used impact drivers, a 21mm socket, an adapter, a 7mm socket, trim panel removal tools, needle nose pliers, wire stripper and crimper, a small hammer, a small flathead screwdriver, and a small flashlight. All right, so the first step in our install is that we need to remove this portion of the dash to expose our radio. Now, to make it a little bit easier, we're going to first pull the air vents so we can get a little bit better access. To do this, open up your vent and you're going to turn it until you see a small opening line up with another opening on the inside there. It's right about here, right after the Jeep logo. So once you locate the opening, get a small flathead screwdriver and go up over this tab that you see. Press down on the tab and that should allow you to turn this vent, and then grab it and pull it out. So once the opening that we were talking about before, once you can see it, put your flathead up and in and press down on this tab. Turn the vent and pull it out. With our vent removed, we can now pop out this center piece. You can do this with a trim panel removal tool, but it makes it a lot easier to just get in through the holes in the vents. Pull this out enough to expose the 2 tabs on the side. Press down on the tab on the back of the connector and remove the window switch. Now we've exposed one of the bolts holding in our dash. We're going to use a 7mm socket and remove it. Next up, we want to remove this rubber insert in this top dish. Now we've exposed the 7mm bolt holding the top of the dash on, and we can remove it with our 7mm socket. Using a trim panel removal tool, pry back on the piece of plastic that goes right underneath your steering wheel so we can get to the last 2 bolts on the dash. Once you have both sides pried off, lean it down like this and remove it straight out. Using a 7mm socket, remove the 2 bolts that we just exposed by taking the trim off underneath the steering wheel. Remove the final bolt holding in the dash on the other side of the steering wheel. With your steering wheel in the down position, you can now grab your dash and start to pull it back off of the rest of the pop clips. We're also going to remove this panel below our radio here. This is optional, but we're going to tap into the cigarette outlet for power, and that's going to be much easier with this panel off. It's just some metal clips holding this on, so pop them off with a trim removal tool and pull it straight out. Once all of your clips are released, it will lean forward just enough to start to unplug the 4 connectors from the back of it. Press down to release all of these connectors. This green connector has a tab right here. That one's a little easier if it's released with a flathead. And finally, our cigarette outlet. Now we can remove the 4 bolts holding our radio in with a 7mm socket. At this point, we can grab the radio and pull it straight out to expose our connectors. At this point, we can hook up our wiring harnesses. There are 2 main ones that have to go into the back of the radio. The first one is here with these long extensions off of it and the gray connectors. Now, one of them is going to go into the back of the radio where the factory harness connects, and then the factory harness is going to connect into the other end. This second wiring harness is going to go into the open spot in the radio, and then one of these AV outlets is going to go to our camera. Remove the factory connector from the back of the radio. Grab the male connector from our harness with the gray connector, plug it in, and then plug your factory connector into the female end. Next up, grabbing the other harness with all of the AV connectors, connect the male end to the back of the radio. Next up, we're going to hook up this small wiring harness. This one connects the camera to the radio and also gives it power. This lone yellow connector is going to go to the AV connector on the side of this wiring harness. It's labeled camera. Make sure you're choosing the one that's hanging out by itself. At this point, tuck the other end of that harness down through the bottom so that we can start to wire it up. Grab the radio, and we're just going to temporarily tuck this back for now so we can make sure it's working and so it's out of the way. So to get power and ground to our camera here, we're going to tap into the cigarette outlet plug. You can definitely wire this up however you'd like, as long as you're getting power and ground here, but we think this is an easy way to do it. We're going to use vampire clips for this. You're welcome to solder or do another form of connection if you'd like. And on our Jeep, the power wire is blue with a red stripe. If for some reason your wiring is a different color, you may want to just double check with a test light that you are going to the power and ground. Getting your vampire clip over the wire, you may want to grab some pliers here just to make sure these seat properly. Next up, our ground wire. Next up, we're going to put our connectors on the end of our wires. Starting with the ground wire, make sure it's twisted nice and tight, and place it into your connector. Grab your crimpers and crimp this side. Repeat that process for the power wire. Grab your ground wire and you're going to hook it up to the ground wire with the vampire clip. Make sure you're going to the correct ones. Repeat that process with the power wire. Now that we hooked up power and ground to our backup camera, we can hook up our pack module. Before we do that, we do want to put the dip switch down. This is dip switch number 1. It's all the way to the inside here. Press it down to activate it. Make sure all the other ones stay up. With that done, connect the 2 smaller connectors to the back of it, the smallest one to this side, and the other one to the far side. You should have 2 blinking green lights at this point. At this point, we can connect our camera just to make sure it's working before we run our harness all the way to the back of the Jeep. Connect the long wiring harness to the one that we just wired up. Grab our keys and turn the ignition on. Now that the both flashing green lights have gone off on our module, we can start the Jeep. All right, let's put it in reverse and test it. So for some reason you fire up your Jeep and your backup camera is on all the time and not just when you're in reverse, check this switch that they've included here. If it's in the back position like this, the camera is going to be on all the time, and they've included this to be able to check function of your camera. The proper spot is the center position to make the camera only come on when you're in reverse. Now you can mount this somewhere if you'd like to be able to test your camera, or you can just make sure that it's in this position and tuck it away so it doesn't get bumped. Let's pull our radio out and tuck our wiring back properly. I think off to the side is a good spot for this module, but anywhere that's out of the way and not going to be pinched is perfectly fine. Replace the 4 7mm bolts in the radio. Grab your 7mm socket and tighten these down. All right, so to make it easier to route our cable to the back of the Jeep, we're going to remove the glove box. Just pull it open. Pinch each side and remove it. All right, so with our glove box removed, we can now pull the smaller wiring harness through and hook it up to the longer one that goes back to our camera. Reach behind the dash, pull the wires through to the opening where your glove box was. And we're gonna route the longer wiring harness that goes to the back of our camera up underneath. Hook these together. And now we're going to route it right along the inside here and right down the center console. Route your wiring harness under here and tuck it underneath your carpet. We're going to go right underneath the carpet and through the cross member that your seat is mounted to. We routed the wiring down the center console, underneath the passenger seat where the other wiring goes. We're gonna run it down these kick panels and all the way to the back of our Jeep. Before we can do that, grab your trim panel removal tool and we're gonna remove the 2 pop clips holding in each of these kick panels. Remove these with a trim panel removal tool. Now these are Christmas tree style, so you're probably going to break or lose these getting them out. With the pop clips out of the trim panels, we can lift them up a little bit and run the wiring down through them. Once you have it through this first piece here, we can now route it right on the inside to the back of our Jeep. Once you've pulled the cable through the back side, we can now start to route it underneath the carpet. You want to aim to put it next to this existing harness. So we're running our cable right along the edge here underneath the carpet, exactly where the other wiring harness runs. Once you get back to this back corner, we're just going to tuck it underneath the frame, right above the subwoofer if you have one, basically just securing it out of the way however you see fit. Then we're just going to attach it to this. You can zip tie if you'd like, but it's going to run the same route. We just have to pop this panel off. So we're going to go underneath this panel with a trim panel removal tool and pop it up. And then pull it out. Next up, we're going to remove this panel so that we can route our cable through and get it through the tailgate. Get behind this panel and pop the metal clips loose. There's also one on the bottom here. And then tilt it and remove it. Run your cable down the factory wiring harness and through this hole to this side. Now we're going to pop the rubber grommet that's holding the harness that goes to our third brake light. Run your cable through the hole in your tailgate. At this point, we can remove our spare tire so that we can mount our bracket. Grab your 21mm socket and let's get our lug nuts off. All right, with our spare tire removed, we can now install our camera bracket. Slide it over top of the top two studs. And now we're going to put our retaining plate on. So if you can't get this retainer to seat by hand, just grab a socket or something to push it on and a mallet, and you should be able to get this on. With our bracket in place, thread the cable on our camera through the hole. We're also going to go right behind the factory tire carrier and follow the same path as the third brake light cables. Now don't seat this yet, just let it hang out right about here because we're going to double check that the picture is in the proper orientation. Now you can connect the cable coming off the camera to this part that we ran through the Jeep. Make sure you line up the arrows on both sides of this connector. Let's turn on our Jeep so we can double check the frame of the screen. So there's a sticker on top of the camera that should indicate where it goes in the bracket. We're just double checking on the screen that the framing of our backup camera is correct with that sticker. Once we like the framing, we can push the camera back into the bracket. To protect the glass while you're pushing the camera in, you can also use a towel in between your hand and the camera. With our camera in place, we can now run the cord through this hole in our tailgate. You may want to secure this cord with zip ties to the existing cord for the third brake light bracket. Seat the grommet. All right, at this point we can replace our spare tire, and we do want to get it right on here with the camera right in between the spokes on the wheel. And you may want a friend for this step because it will take a little bit of finagling. With a few lug nuts in place, just double check that your camera is still positioned correctly, right about in here in between the spokes, and then you can tighten these down. Now we can open our tailgate and start to tuck away our wiring and replace our trim panels. We're just going to tuck the excess wiring right in this panel here. You can throw a zip tie on it if you'd like, just as long as it's neatly tucked out of the way. And replace this trim piece. Replace this trim piece by getting these tabs into these holes up here like this, and then pushing down. Replace any pop clips that you may have removed to access trim. Now we can reinstall the glove box. Make sure you line up the tabs on the bottom first. And once the tabs are lined up in the bottom, squeeze each side and shut it. Now we can reinstall all of the pieces of our dash. Line up this panel and start plugging in your connectors. Now line up all the tabs. And push this piece back into place. At this point, we can reinstall our main dash piece. Get it over the steering wheel. Line up your clips and pop your dash into place. Replace the 7mm screws that hold in your dash. Replace the tray up top. Replace the window switch. Replace the vents. Line up the tabs here. And then once it's in place, turn it so the Jeep logo is up. Replace the bolts on either side of the steering wheel. Line up the tabs on the bottom of this trim piece that goes underneath the steering wheel, and then snap it back into place. All right, so that is going to do it for the review and install of our backup camera. Remember, for all things Jeep, keep it at ExtremeTerrain.com.